Welcome, welcome. Jamie Hernandez here, founder of Breakthrough Yoga Coaching Method, helping you bridge the gap between your spiritual practice and your business. I'm going to chime some bells just because I feel like it. So listen. So just letting the vibration clear the space. Because today, I want to ask you, have you studied with your master teachers or gone on some kind of journey in some kind of medicine technology, some kind of healing transformation technology that has brought you through a journey, and then all of a sudden you come out of it and you're literally vibing on a new frequency? Or maybe sometimes it's like you go through some sort of tunnel of transformation. Maybe it is a death of a loved one. Maybe it is a vacation to a place that completely changes your spirit. Maybe it is some birthing experience, literally or metaphorically. Or maybe you do a teacher training and it's a month long, or you stay at an ashram, or you go on you go to Peru and you go do ayahuasca retreat, or some kind of ceremony, or some kind of ritual, some kind of container that when you got to the other side, you literally felt like a new person. You literally felt like you were in a vortex, in a paradigm that is so different and is such a big contrast to your actual day-to-day mundane life. So let me know in the comments if that has ever happened to you. Someone just called me on my messenger phone, and I know she went to like a Catholic school, like a monastery for, I would say, I don't know how long, but and when she was 17, and she said that changed her life, the prayers, the meditation, so it is some container that you've been in, and all of a sudden that frequency that you know so well is so different from the frequency of just like your everyday life. Maybe you go back to work, maybe you have kids, maybe something is going on, and the contrast is so drastic that you sort of have almost like, I titled this topic today, the Retreat Comedown, because you almost can have like this high of the highs, reaching into the stratosphere, going to the moon and back, going to the depths of your soul, bearing it all to, okay, like now I have to cook dinner, and I have to do my taxes and clean my floor and wash the dishes. Like the contrast can be so different. And so sometimes in that contrast, we can either go spiraling really into a darker place, and all of our kind of narcissistic egoic tendencies start to come up, or we can be riding high and like from the bliss of it all, and just sort of come back from this place, or maybe in a void. Like I remember I went to the ashram and I came back and I was just like, why can't I just stare at the leaf? Why do I need clothes? Like, so it was just, there's just many different states of being that happen after the retreat or the container or the mystical journey that you've gone through. And the reason why I talk about it, and I want to talk about it today, is because what's so important for us spiritual entrepreneurs is, okay, so now that we've gone through this mystical, magical journey that we can't even explain to our everyday people, because you can't explain something like that. Maybe you can for those who shared similar experiences, but still it will never, it's like trying to explain, how I birthed my child. Yes, I can explain it, but you can never really explain it in your words, because it is your own experience. So how do we now integrate all of that magic, all of that mystical, all of that wonder and awe, and that place where we were so expanded in our being, in our heart? how do we integrate that and transition back into our everyday life? Because our everyday life can seem so stark and unmagical and just so different that it can be shocking. It can be shocking to your system, and you start to question your life, and that's kind of what those journeys help you do, is really question your life, and not that one is better than the other, because I want to talk about that. Not one is better than the other. And so here I want to talk about understanding when you go on a mystical journey and then you try to integrate it back into your life. There's a couple of things that we have to kind of take into consideration, because it's such a stark contrast. It's almost like, the days that you feel really good, life is like, you go outside and you want to talk to everyone. And when you are not feeling well, you're kind of like, don't talk to me. Oh my God, my stomach hurts. I don't know. It's like night and day. And so what's important to understand is when we go on these mystical retreats and we have these visions and these insights and this expanded state of being where we're living from our truth, our heart, and all that, we have to understand, number one, that state of being, and this is what my teacher Milèna pointed out, which was so important to understand, that state of being is not acquired. So just because I went through the ashram and I can just bliss out and look at a leaf all day, I don't come back and I'm not necessarily able to be in that blissful, floaty state all the time. So, or that just like that expanded, heart opening, laughter, blissful state is not necessarily acquired state that is going to stay with you, the whole way through, right? It's not necessarily supposed to. So what we want to start to look at is that the retreat, right, gives us clues, because the other thing that my teacher has taught me is that the path has now been forged. So there was a way into this mystical, magical, soul-bearing place, and there was a map and there was a path that got us there. So instead of thinking, oh my God, I was off into this blissful place and now I feel like crap and now I don't know what to do, we want to start to contemplate, well, how did we get there? So number one, we want to start to realize it was a very sacred container, right? I recently went, and I talked about this already, I've recently went to El Salvador for a week retreat, which felt like 1,000 lifetimes in El Salvador. And so that container within a very special hotel, which was a hotel yoga surf hotel, where the managers, the owners were very spiritual people who built this place specifically for a retreat context to hold sacred ceremonies. So the whole entire country and the place where we were in and the ceremonial places that we visited was a container. So number one, if you want to kind of forge your way back to this mystical, magical place, we have to understand the container. And so we start to bridge the gap. Okay, so that, we think, oh my God, but I can never go back to El Salvador and have that special hotel. But what is our container here in our everyday, right? I got a little container right here. It's just in the corner. It's my altar, right? And even the clothes I'm wearing are and the jewelry I'm wearing are this container that reminds me of the magic that I experienced. So there is a certain container that I've created here in my mundane everyday life. There are certain musics I play. There are certain ways, right? So there's a particular container. There's many different kind of ritual and ceremonial things I do to create a container that gets me in touch even if it's just like this, with my spirit and my soul. Now, is it going to be like that magical place where we're soaring and we felt so alive? And so maybe not, but I sure do know how to touch that kind of secret inner world that nobody really knows except me. So there's so many things I do on a daily basis. So number one, what is your container? So that's the clue that the retreat has given us. Okay, other clues that it's given us. There's a commitment. When you pack your bags and you take off work and you kind of leave the kids with your partner, or if your dog or whatever, your house, and you buy the ticket, and oh my God, between this time and this time I'm going to be there, and I'm like, for me, I kind of shut off like social media. It takes months of preparation and commitment to and investment and time and energy to make it happen, right? So the other clue that the retreat gives you, this retreat, is that there's a commitment, right? What are we committing to? And we know whenever I go on these magical retreats, it's like I know I'm committing to my soul, because that's what my soul needs. It calls for that, right? So commitment. What are we committing to? And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's another clue. Another clue that we want to start to see is like, well, what's the technology that was utilized to get you to your soul, to your spirit, in touch with that kind of inner magical world? What was the technology? And for all of us in this spiritual community, we all have many technologies: breath work, movements, body work, energy work. There's so many different technologies. There's thousands of different types of technologies. And so when I went to the ashram, there was chanting, it was meditation, it was eating sattvic food, it was waking up at 5 a.m. So what is the technology? And in particular, this technology that I practice many technologies with many teachers, but this technology in particular was conscious movement, functional movement that became a sacred dance. Okay, and we can't just sort of superficially look at that. That's a whole. When I say technology, it literally is a technology, right? So what is the definition of technology? It is something that has been developed over time to move us through from one point to another, right? So there's a certain technology. So let me know what technology in the comments for you is most present, because if you are anything like me and my clients, we all have our secret technology. Like I was with my friend, and she like has her mala beads. That's what she uses for when she prays and when she meditates. Like there's so many technologies. So what is the technology? That's another thing that has gotten you forged the path. Okay. The other thing that is also, is also important to understand is we don't heal alone. So the other thing about the retreat is I've been studying with these sisters for like a year online, okay? And so it was this sacred container, and we went through many different ceremonies and rituals and practices together and sharings, right? So there is a certain container of the community, of the sangha, of the sisterhood, of the brotherhood. There is a community, right? So that's the other tool that the retreat is offering us. Is it's starting to give us clues like, ooh, so when you come back into your mundane, there is a level of understanding your own rituals, your own ceremonies, your own container. But when you're ready, and when you have done that in your own home and self and body, where is your community, right? Is it within your family? Is it with your dog lovers? Is it with your choir? Is it with your meditation group? Is it with your jogging group? Like, where is your sisterhood, brotherhood, community, your sangha, right? So we are on this path alone, but we also are never not supported. And your community could also be your angels, your guides, but you're human, so you also need human community, okay? So the retreat started to give us clues like, wow, the power of sisterhood, the power of community. And even if they're not necessarily in your day-to-day life, just touching base with them and just knowing, right? Knowing that they're in your vortex. There's something about that creates a energetic container, right? Just knowing that even just one other person is on the same wavelength as you is very powerful, right? And then we don't kind of fall into the ego perspective of thinking we're alone, because we're never alone. We are physically in solitude, but we're never alone. There are 9 billion people that we have maybe a small pocket, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 people. And also, so that could be like our deeper community, right? Our deeper tribe and our sisters that we know we can be ourselves with. That's the kind of test I always tell my girls. It's like, your real friends are your friends that you can really be you. You don't have to change, right? So that's your deeper circle. And then in your communities that maybe you practice certain things together, like that's your kind of extended sort of tribe, okay? And then the other thing about the retreat that we learn from is that it is a protected energy. So from a very practical point of view, our time there had a schedule. Not a tight, rigid schedule, but not a loosey-goosey schedule where we sort of like, what are we doing today? I don't know. It was a spacious, yet, hey, Nicole, right? So, let me know if any of this resonates with you, Nicole, about this stuff I'm talking about, with this journey that, that you've probably gone through in parts of your life. It could be a long time ago, it could be recently, right? And so there is a protected energy, which means that there's a protected schedule. So when you bring the mystical back into the mundane, there's got to be a kind of schedule. So, every night, and the way I think is very easy for you to do it is always match it with something that you regularly do, like brush your teeth. Right before I go to bed, you always go to bed, right? I always go to bed. I sit by my altar and I pray with just little symbolic items to keep the energy, right? Because all of a sudden when you are in prayer, it creates a thread. Okay, I'm going to talk about prayer a little bit more, but it creates a thread. And the more you energetically put into that thread, then the thread starts to weave itself to where it needs to go. So there's got to be a schedule, right? Where your energy is protected in the sacred, right? And there's another place I do it. I go to the bathroom and I take a shower every day. And in the shower, it is a sacred cleanse, right? And after the shower, I put on music and there's a sacred dance, right? And I don't get out of the bathroom until I feel like I've transitioned, right? From that, oh my God, I need to do everything, to, okay, where my body is relaxed, the container of my body is relaxed, the mind is emptied, and the energy is expanded, and yet at the same time energetically protected. Like, ooh, okay, this is the internal world that I've created. So now I'm going to go outside into the world with this, right? So that's another thing that the retreat has taught us, is that our energy needs to be protected. So in the retreat, there is very specific schedule. There is very specific times. Now, in between, this is important, in between when you're practicing, there's got to be a level of integration. So our energy was also protected. So if we had this very, rich ceremonial ritual, we didn't necessarily just go right back out into the world. We made time to let the nervous system adjust, right? So in your mundane, this is the thing that I think I teach all of our clients who are taking their spiritual work and utilizing it and creating a business out of it. Creativity requires space. So I always talk about this, and I've been talking about this for a long time. The spiritual house must be clean first before the business house enters. So if you're all kind of like dysregulated and your nervous system is all stressed out and your body is all, and you're what you are taking in mentally and energetically is just all wonky, right? You can't dive back into your mundane with your kids or your business, because that's going to be what's kind of like vomited out, right? It's going to be the reaction versus the response. So, what was I saying? We have to continue to make sure that we're constantly giving ourselves space. This is what I was going to say. Giving ourselves space before we enter the mundane. So what I teach all our clients is like, my client, he was like, okay, so how many hours should I work on my business? How much time should I be online? And I said, well, first of all, your body, your mind, and your spirit need to be ready before you even touch your work, right? That is the spiritual practice. So if that means you need to go jump in a lake, go walk your dog, go whatever, dance around in your house, sage yourself, I don't know what it is that you do. We have to spend time in the spiritual house until we've transitioned and rested. And that sometimes literally just means go take a nap, right? Go take a nap before you touch your life's work, right? Before you touch your life's work, go take a nap. So you see, the retreat, here I am in my mundane life, and oh my God, and then like my nervous system's starting to get all out of whack because I'm going so high and my momentum is kind of going too fast. Whoo! Like before the retreat, I was like, my nervous system was agitated, and I knew, ooh boy, I need to kind of sometimes you need to dive deep in the retreat, and then sometimes it's just your day to day. But I knew I need to kind of go into a different paradigm, because this nervous system is so agitated, even with my kind of everyday practices. Ooh, there's something here that kind of needs to kind of shift. So I dived into the retreat before I came back here in my day-to-day life with my family and my work. And so it's this permission giving of, sometimes when work feels like work, you need to take a break. And that doesn't mean take a break all the time until all of a sudden you kind of just sort of fall out of your bed. That's not what I mean. It means take a break so that you're in deep prayer. You're in touch, not with the fatigue, but you're in touch with, you can get in touch with your soul again. So the soul is the one starts to speak, not the everyday mundane to-do list or fatigue, or the kind of, sometimes we get into that rut of sort of not activating, right? Not activating and not necessarily bringing ourselves close to the soul. So sometimes we're too unactivated, or sometimes we're overly activated, right? So how can we find that place where we can truly come back in? And that takes preparation, right? That takes preparation, right? So if you're going to share your work with the world, you got to prepare, yeah? And, it's like my teacher, I was talking to, okay, so let me go on. Let me go further, okay? So the retreat gives us clues, okay? So the high of the highs is not acquired. So I went through those kind of points just so you can see, the retreat is giving us clues to bring back into our everyday life, right? The path has been forged, okay? So point number 2, the path has been forged. So the technology, you want to start to observe, what was the technology? Yeah. And the interesting thing about technology is that you have your whole life experience, and you'll most likely synergize it with your already existing practices. But the technology has been forged. The path has been forged. So we start to look at, what is the technology? And what baseline? Because when you soar high and you go into your soul and you touch that mystical, magical place, there is a new baseline. There is a new baseline. It's not acquired, meaning to say you're not necessarily on this high, blissful place all the time. But there is a new baseline that you know, and you have the technology to get there, right? So you start to look at, what am I committing to? And start with the body, because one of the things that the baselines start to teach you is that it is a new nervous system. Huh? Have you been on journeys? Have you been on spiritual retreats? Have you gone to church? Have you just like, you start to realize there's a new frequency and a new baseline that you've lived. So the question becomes, what are you committing to? What nervous system? What chemicals, right, are you committing to? And that's a tangible way to come back to it in your everyday life, because you always have a nervous system and you always have your chemistry to tap into, right? So it's a little bit deeper than just the physical body, just in doing your kind of sun salutations. There is a particular nervous system, right? And for me, it's like that nervous system was steady. It wasn't that agitated nervous system that I came there with. It was the ability to easily rest. It was the ability to go swimming if I needed to. It was the ability to go for a hike if I needed to. The ability to have a deep conversation, or go eat good food, or walk in the town if I needed to. Right? So there's a new nervous system. So you start to remember. You start to remember, what did my nervous system feel like, right, in my new baseline? And how can I discern when I'm not in that nervous system? And how can I forge my way back? So for example, one of the things that really stressed me out, was stressing me out before I left the retreat, was when it came back down to like, okay, now dinner time, now homework time, now, I would just get my nervous system would get so agitated because I was getting overwhelmed. So now, when I approach dinner time, I'm committing to the new baseline. So how do I do that? I put on, lately it's been Tracy Chapman, okay? And I sing with her. Right? Because she sings from her soul and she sings from her vulnerable humanity. And that's what I connected to during the retreat. And also my roommate, she was also listening to Tracy Chapman. Do you see? So I'm creating this kind of environment that brings me back into that flow. So I just stay in the presence of that song, and then it's like as I'm cutting and I'm moving and I'm being in my body, things just happen, and then all of a sudden the meal's cooked because I'm committing to going and forging back on the path in my mundane, right? So the path is not going to look the same. No, I'm not going to be given vegan, vegetarian food served on this beautiful platter made by the beautiful Salvadoran people that were working in the hotel. No, it's not going to be like that. So I have to kind of accept, well, if I want my meals to be sacred and I want to be in the flow and I want to appreciate it, how can I do that? So for me, it's J.C. Chapman, cutting my just potatoes, eating really simply, and creating that meal out of that devotional love and presence. So the path has been forged. What are we committing to? What nervous system are you committing to? The other thing is our chemicals. What chemistry are we committing to? When you are in bonds and literally in touch, right? If you have animals, if you have dear, close people that you literally physically are in touch with, that you hug, or even your own personal self massage or dance. I'm learning how to kind of release oxytocin through contacting the floor, so a lot of floor work. There are certain chemicals in the body, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, that get released. So how can I forge the path back to releasing those chemicals? In the retreat, I did a lot of kind of contact work and floor work and bonding work with the community, with my sacred sisters, right? And no, I don't have a bunch of sacred sisters dancing around in my house, but I'm going to commit to my everyday floor work. So yes, I'm going to make the container, I'm going to put out my mats, and I'm going to do the floor work every day, right? So these are tangible things, your nervous system and your chemistry, that you can find your way back to those chemicals. And you're going to have to find it in the mundane. It's not going to look the same, but it takes a level of discipline and commitment, which is my next point. So there's 3 points. The state of being in retreat is not required, and I talked about the points that get us, that the retreat, how the retreat gave us some clues of how to get us back. The path has already been forged, so how can we forge our way back? Using our nervous system and our chemistry, okay? Because that's something you always have. You may not have my teacher created this like sacred ceremonial fire circle. No, you may not have that, but how can you put something in place to bring yourself back into that chemistry? Yeah. Okay. So lastly, point number 3 is we need to develop, and this is what I teach all our clients, a devotional discipline. So it's not that rigid discipline, like get your goals done, and oh my God, if you don't do it, then you're gonna like berate yourself for being lazy and not getting your shit together. Like that is one way of doing things, but it's not necessarily effective, especially if you are somebody who is sensitive, who can fly off into the ethers, who can be in contact with your angels, can be in contact with magic. Okay, it's not going to happen from that masculine kind of energetic way. So what is your devotional discipline? So here's where I want to come back to kind of this full circle. Before I went on the retreat, like 5 years ago, in my mind, and this is what I call deeper prayers, I told myself, if there's another retreat in El Salvador, because this is the second time I've gone there, I'm going to go. And it would be really cool if it happened around my birthday. So guess what happened? It comes around, okay, 5 years later, it's coming around. I'm like, ooh, okay, after I haven't traveled for like, good 4 years, it was literally fell on my birthday week, okay? So your devotional discipline is your capacity to listen to your deeper prayers. And when your deeper prayers show up in your life, the devotional discipline is to actually listen and have the courage to commit to what you were praying about. Okay? Because prayer is easy. You can ask for many different things, and you can pray, and you can see, and you can vision what is possible. But when it comes down to actually 3D, okay, I gotta buy the plane ticket. I gotta take some work off. I gotta put some money aside. There's something about learning how to trust your deeper prayers. Okay? And there's something about learning how to see when your deeper prayers are like, okay, you prayed for this, so here I am. And then there's something about taking action on that prayer. And nobody else saw the prayer except for me. Well, it's kind of not true. When you pray, it goes out into the ether, and all of a sudden you kind of, those who are also wanting that same prayer, so like my sisterhood, creates this kind of energetic thread before it even happens, and then it kind of trickles down into the 3D. That's sort of what happens, okay? So don't discount your deeper prayers because they are being put out in the ether. Now, it is the human kind of side of us that, when it's now like, this is what you've been praying for. So you can't just put things out in the ether and just dream about it and forget about it. You kind of like, there has to be sort of like, this recognition and this wakefulness and this awakeness to like, okay, I prayed for this. It's happening now. Now I have to tell my husband who may not like really want me to go, or not so cool on it, my kids and all this stuff. Like there's a devotional discipline to your deep prayers. And my teacher who created this masterful 7-day retreat. Now, if you do anything like work one-on-one, workshops, I've done teacher trainings, 200-hour teacher trainings, I would say retreats are probably the kind of highest retreat and ceremony, or sort of like the highest level of energy that you can and concentration that you need, because it's a 24-hour consecutive process that you bring your students through. So she was with this vision of hers for like 2 years before she put it out there. And just like I was with my kind of prayer, so maybe the prayer got to her before, 5 years before it actually happened, okay? So devotional discipline, and what are you devoting to? You're devoting to your own inner truth. The prayers that nobody can see but you. And that takes courage. Because your visions are unique. And the way you see your work and the way you see yourself out there in the world are unique to you. And that's the thing that I tell my clients. It's like, I can get you on the path to listening and seeing and feeling and trusting your deeper prayers, but you're the only one that knows your truth. You are the only one that knows your truth. And at a certain point, you kind of have to, okay, truth, and develop that courage to implement. And sometimes it's just these small implementations until you build the thread of like, every time I listen to that truth, something happens, something magical happens. Okay? So, and especially when the commitment is like, this is like a deep commitment, the the unfolding of that, like I said, I felt like I've lived thousands of prayers in 1 week. Because what is that from? 5 years of holding that thread. Do you see the devotional discipline? And that's not, don't confuse it with devotional discipline means I have to pray at my altar every day. I need to do my sun salutations. Yes, that's the technology. But don't confuse it with what am I devoting to? What is the truth I'm going to devote to and actually take action on? And that's where the courage kind of needs to be built little by little. Every time you kind of pull a little thread and act on something that you know is true, and you stay and you commit to that path, something happens. Okay? So, the other thing, I guess my last point I want to talk about is, now that you kind of gone through this whole journey, here's what we tend to do, okay? And this is the biggest kind of, I would say, there's no mistakes, but this is kind of like what we kind of misuse the energy. We go on this deep retreat. We have these mystical, magical experiences. And then we get high, and then we're kind of like on withdrawal. So then we go out and we look for another thing. It's kind of like the nomadic traveler that's traveling, and they finally are nomadic and digital, and these digital nomads, and they're traveling and they're going all over the world, but it's never satisfying, right? Because when you go on a journey, you need time to let that baseline, let the magic, let the integrate into your everyday boring life. Instead of jumping on the next plane to go to the next, ayahuasca retreat or ceremony, or escape to the ashram, or whatever it is you do, go to some kind of island and just be in the ocean. Like, I'm not saying not to do that. I'm just saying synergize what you've learned before jumping to the next thing, before jumping on the next spiritual bandwagon, because there's so much out there. There's so many teachers, so much magic out there. There's so much, and sometimes we want to just get the high, but we don't actually know how to take the magic and actually bring it into the mundane. So you synergize what you know, right, into your mundane, so that you maybe come back and you go kind of spiraling down, but then like, ooh, okay, so let me use the technology that I've learned. Like for me, one of the new technologies I'm learning more about is floor work, working on the ground with my body through dance and movement and functional movement. So I'm not going to go out and try to do something else before I've integrated those parts that are not acquired yet, right? Even the things I've been practicing for the last year are not acquired yet, right? Some are more acquired than others, and some things I've mastered, right? So, like for me, clearing the mind is something I've mastered. But certain things like, going into my body, tapping into that chemical, tapping into those chemistries, that's not an acquired state of being. I'm still kind of mastering that. So synergize what you know and integrate it into your own personal experiences, your own practices, your own technologies, into your mundane. Okay? So let me review what today was called the Retreat Comedown, that place where you journey into the mystical, and then you come back out and you're like, oh my God, like, you've just gone through this tunnel of transformation, and now you're in this, you experience this magical, mystical state of being, and now you're sort of like, okay, now I'm in my everyday life. How do I integrate that? Step number 1, the retreat has left us clues. I talked about intentional prayer. I talked about commitment. What are we committing to? What new baseline? I talked about having the container, right? What is your container? So it was El Salvador, and then what is your container here at home, right? What are you committing to here at home? What is your intentional prayer? What is the technology that you're going to practice on a daily, on a daily, on an hourly, on a minute? Because soon what you're going to start to realize is that I have so many different kind of rituals that it's like it kind of just becomes my everyday. And not everything is like that, but like some things are, right? Like me dancing in the kitchen when I'm cooking is something that I'm integrating, right? But it's something I'm doing on a daily one. You know, when I'm outside, like how do I connect to the magic and the mystical of the trees and the birds and the sky and the earth, all the elements? Okay, so what is the technology, right? And are you going to, technology doesn't work unless you use it, right? The technology that works for you, right? What was the technology? And how are you going to protect your energy? What is your schedule? And again, just match it up with some things that you already do. I always go to bed. So right before the bed, I'm going to go to my altar. I always take a shower. So in my shower, I'm going to do my sacred dance, right? I always cook dinner. So what am I going to do? I'm going to sing soulful songs and be in my body and move, okay? So the state of being is not acquired, but the retreat left us clues. That's kind of point number one. Point number two, the path has been forged. So again, don't jump on another path. The path has been forged. Okay, so for me, it was this conscious movement. It was functional movement that turned into sacred dance. So how am I going to utilize this technology to commit to my new baseline, right? And again, how you tap into that baseline is what is a new nervous system? And so nervous system can be felt. So okay, starting to, like, my husband's he's on a different nervous system, and his nervous system is much more fast. And whenever I feel his nervous system, I'm like, that's his nervous system. But I don't want to be on that quickness, that rushy, because that kind of starts to make me agitated. So I'm going to commit to my nervous system and my technologies that keep me there, right? And what chemicals, right? So am I going to continue to tap into the adrenaline of things all, or am I going to tap into the oxytocin? Like I gave my daughters like these big long hugs yesterday. Am I going to tap into the dopamine? Am I going to tap into the serotonin, right? And how do we do that? And sometimes it's those little small things, but sometimes it's actually the commitment of, okay, I'm going to do floor work, which means I have to put mats all over my living room. And my husband's like, oh, are these mats going to stay here for are they going to stay here? But it's like, yeah, I got my kind of yoga space is not ready downstairs. So I gotta, this is the space, and I'm going to kind of wrap it up. But I have to kind of take my space, right, to get to that new baseline in chemistries. And lastly, the last 2 points, devotional discipline. Are you staying in the past, staying in the technology so that you can listen to your deepest prayers? And that takes courage, and that takes excitement, that takes curiosity, that takes, I don't know what's going to happen. My soul just told me to do this, and I don't know, but I'm going to try this new dance class. I'm going to try hang out with this new person. I'm going to, and like sometimes it's these big leaps and bounds where it's like, I'm going to go all the way south and go in this container. And then, but in your day to day, it's like, what are those things that you're like, your soul, basically in your everyday mundane, what lights you up? And do you have the courage to do that? right? Just go do that. Whatever that may be. I'm going to go try that new steam room at my gym. I'm going to go take this tennis lesson. I'm going to go take Spanish. You know, like, what lights you up? I'm going to go walk and check out that new store down the street. Like, what lights your soul up from curiosity and excitement? Okay, so devotional discipline doesn't have to be so serious. It's the devotion to your heart, to your spirit. Okay? And then lastly, how are you synergizing it all so that you can synergize in your life, but also so that you can share it? So here is the thing for all of you coaches, all of you healers, all of you transformational people. As much as it's really juicy and fun to have all of this like technology for ourselves, if we don't share it, the consequence is, one, we're not going to necessarily master it. It's not going to be acquired, right? Thank you. Devotion doesn't have to be so serious, right? So this last point I think is really important, Nicole. And thank you for your reflection back. I appreciate you. But we got to share what we've learned. It's kind of like if you've picked a lot of strawberries and then you just eat them all. But there's too much for you to eat. And then all of a sudden you're like, you have a stomach ache. You have to share the nectar of your devotional discipline, of the trainings, of all the things that you've learned. And sometimes it's a small sharing where you look somebody in the eye. And as coaches, sometimes it takes a little bit more devotional discipline where you got to sit down with your diary, you got to commit to some kind of schedule, you got to commit to when you're doing this, who you're doing this with. So it's like the practicality of your own vision needs to come out into the world. Maybe you start with one person, then you start with two, then you start with three. But it's like, because if we don't, here's what's going to happen. Your neuroses, your chronic, whatever it is that kind of keeps you kind of stuck, are going to amplify. I don't know why, but that's just kind of how it works, right? So if you've ever met somebody who's really into healing, but that they're only healing themselves, you'll notice that they're always healing, but almost feel like they're not getting anywhere. And it's almost like there's always another thing that starts to happen, another boo-boo, another thing, right? Because the energy, there's so much energy that it's like it doesn't have a place to go. So we need to learn how to share. Okay, again, sometimes it can be in small ways, but share with those who are ready. And that is part of devotional discipline, because you don't know. If you have this idea of who you want to share your work with, you don't know. So there is that commitment. But if we stay in the thread and we stay committed and we continue to put out what is compelling us inside, right? It will come back, but we have to stay on that thread. And so, one of the things I teach all my clients is that you'll get to where you want to go as long as you stay on your path, as long as you continue to follow your North Star, which nobody can tell you what that looks like other than you. You might get reflections back on like, ooh, I really love the way they're living life. But you have a vision. And it takes commitment. And it takes doing it and fumbling as you get there, right? But the truth of the matter is, if you stay committed, that vision inside will manifest. And I've given you a big roadmap now to sort of stay with it. These are my faith beads that I picked up when I was in El Salvador, right? And I pray with these beads because they symbolize keeping the faith, right? I don't know, like this next kind of vision I have for my future and my work, I don't know if it's going to work, but I do know if I commit to it, something's going to happen. Because if I know I just keep it to myself, all my own neurotic neuroses are just going to kind of amplify. And I'm going to, and again, it's like some of the one of the biggest mistakes we do is we go back, oh, maybe I have to heal more. No, you need to share, right? There's a certain point where you kind of go into your sacred cave, you go into your mystical, magical world, but there's the internal world, but then there's the external world, right? So I really hope that this training has given you some ahas. If there are any ahas, any light bulb moments, please biggest takeaways, please let me know in the comments. I want to hear them. And what are you going to take away from this training? Because that's, that is the thing. It's like, ooh, we can't just say, ooh, that was a good idea. It's like, how am I going to implement that now? And if any of this resonates with you and you want to take that thing that is inside of you, beckoning you, calling you, and it will not stop calling, I'm telling you that too. Your soul calling will continue to call. It's just how it works. I don't know. I didn't design that. So if you're ready to listen to that calling and make it and bring it into the 3D world and forge the path and create a sacred container so that you can continue to implement and you take care of your spiritual house so that you can take care of your business house, right? In a practical way where you're not just doing it and living out of your car. You can do this and actually create a financial abundance, whatever that means for you, financial freedom, whatever that means for you. If that means living very simply on a beach in South America, then great. If that means, buying $1 million home, then great. But again, that's your truth, right? And we want to honor what it is we want, how we want to live in the mundane and the everyday. Okay, so that the two, the spiritual and the mundane, they're not separate. So the more we kind of have our spiritual practice intact and learn how to implement it, right, the more that their inside world and the outside world are going to reflect each other and they're going to come closer and closer to each other. So it's not this distant, like, I'm living in my car, but I have this like deep spiritual practice. We kind of have to start to synergize, bring them together. So if you are interested in that, let me know, Jamie. I would like to book a breakthrough yoga coaching call. DM me, let me know. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you an application form and we're going to look at where you're stuck, where you think you're stuck. So many people think like it's the marketing, it's the selling, it's the money. That's the symptom. Okay, so we're going to look behind that, where you're stuck. We're going to look at where you're stuck in the body, where you're stuck in the mind, where you're stuck in your energetic field. And that will be like the domino effect to help you move towards where you want to go. Because if you're visioning it, it already exists. So what's the technology to bring it back here, practically here on Earth, right? And that's what I'm here to do, is to bridge that gap. Because so many of us have our deep practices and we kind of don't know how to make it into like our everyday bank account, right? So that's what I want to offer you guys. Utilize your deep practices so that whatever life you want here in your everyday mundane is your living reality. So my name is Jamie Hernandez. Thank you so much for your presence, for the work you're doing right now. And I'm here. DM me. Sometimes Katie, after this, she'll put the link to my Calendly in the comments, so you can look out for that, and or DM me directly through Facebook Messenger or Instagram. All right. We'll see each other next week, 11 a.m. Bye, guys. Thank you.